maybe our listener feels like, hey, I'm not a very good leader and I want to be. What would your recommendation be?
For someone who is down on themselves a little bit, it's good to recognize where the weakness is, but it's not too good to spend a lot of time stewing in that pot. When a company's been structured right, it's going to almost have its own soul. And if the employees don't align with that soul and personality of the business, it's going to be really difficult for them to feel like they can make those decisions, because the soul of the company says we should do things this way, and their personality says we should do things this way. I've been running the business for years. I have a few employees, and I wanted to take 1 week off, and I literally had customers look at me and say, what if something goes wrong? I was like, wait, how did I mess up this bad that I can't even go on vacation?
Excited to share another episode of the Everyday Leader podcast. Today, I will be interviewing Jason McKenzie. He is an author and dynamic speaker and one of 17 siblings. I'm actually sad we didn't explore that on the episode today. He is the founder of Boise Web, the Grisora Business Movement, and the Small Business Big Visibility podcast. He is known for his high energy, story-driven approach that makes business growth simple, actionable, and exciting. Jason inspires entrepreneurs to build businesses they love, not businesses that trap them. He's a great example of that, a great father, and honestly, someone who is really good at taking complex issues and helping simplify them. And how do you create freedom in your business, in your home, in your life?
Welcome to the Everyday Leader podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
Welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Leader podcast. Today, it's just going to be me and Jason McKenzie. You'll have to excuse Matt and Tate for not being here, but really excited to bring Jason on. He and I met through a mutual friend a couple weeks ago, and I can tell Jason just really cares about serving people, helping people, inspiring others, and he's got a lot of experience in business and in life that I think you're really going to enjoy. If you are a business owner or entrepreneur, you're going to want to make sure you check out what he has. He's got a couple podcasts he's a part of: Small Business, Big Visibility, and Aurora Life is the other podcast. Rosora. Oh, I'm sorry, Jason.
It's all good.
Thanks for correcting me. Rosora. I was making sure Jason was paying attention. He obviously is. And then he's got a book about SEO that he published. What was the name of that book again, Jason?
So that book is called Small Business, Big Visibility, Local SEO Made Easy.
Okay, great. So if you're a small business owner and you're looking for tips or help to get a bigger presence in your market, go check that book out of his, and he's got another one coming. Hopefully we'll talk a little bit about that today. The title's not even announced, so I'm excited to learn more about that. And Jason, thanks for taking your time out of your busy. This will air in January, but we're in the Christmas season and it's a busy time of year. So thanks for your time today.
Yeah. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, Jason, before we get into a little bit about you. I mentioned we're going to ask you about leadership and what that means to you. And we love starting with this because in a world where leadership's just a word that I feel like is thrown around, and especially in business every day, and it can mean a million different things depending on where you're at. When you hear the word leadership, how do you define that?
That's a great question. And to me, I don't think I can answer that without telling a little about myself, because my answer is going to be perfect, right? And so I can tell you some of the things that I know is not leadership. And I've seen the people who they're the loudest person in the room, and they're yelling, you do this, this is the way it should be, this is the way what'd you do, you messed that up. And they feel like they're the firefighter. And they're always running in, maybe the knight on the horse, and they come riding in and they save the day and they put out the fires, they solve the problem, they slay the dragon, and they're riding off immediately to solve the next problem. That is not a leader. But what I found is a lot of people who wear that hat or play that part or act that role, they think they are being a leader. And so there's this huge deception that people that are stuck in that role have, where they're like, oh man, it's a good thing I'm here to save the day and keep everyone on track. When in reality, leadership is the exact opposite. When you have good leadership, oftentimes the dragons don't come attacking, the fires don't come blazing up as big. And the reason for that is a good leader and someone who exhibits leadership is going to take all the people around them and allow those people and help cultivate those people so that those individuals grow into their responsibilities and they're able, both from a mental standpoint as well as a capacity standpoint, so both belief and capacity, they're developed until they have the belief and capacity to be able to stand where they're supposed to, do what they're supposed to with excellence, and oftentimes enjoy being in that position. So a good leader develops people to have the capacity, have the desire, and have satisfaction from doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Capacity, desire, and satisfaction. I like that. I'm taking note. I'm taking notes. Hey, Jason. And I love that you said what leadership isn't. Like sometimes the way I found the best way for me to learn is sometimes define what something isn't or what doesn't work well, and then it makes it easier to see what is. So I'm really glad you went that route. And yeah, if you had to summarize that, if you had to make that more concise, more condensed, if you had to put in a few words, what's leadership?
Yeah, a leader is the individual who helps people increase their ability and their desire and belief to do what they're supposed to be doing.
Cool. No, I like that. And it sounds like it very much isn't a leader, is someone who handles every problem in their organization, in their business, in their church, and everything has to go to them and they put out all fires and they make all decisions. So it sounds like that in your mind isn't the definition of a leader.
No, that's as bad as it gets. I felt really proud one day. I thought I hit a moment where I thought, hey, I might be a leader, and like what I did may have led me to where I feel like I've become a bit of a leader, because I had an employee and the employee met with a potential customer, and this employee normally doesn't do sales, but they stepped into that just temporarily to help out with our team. And that employee sent me a message afterwards and said, this potential customer was giving, I won't use their actual word, but giving not appropriate vibes for our culture and our company. I told him that we're not a good fit and to go somewhere else. And it wasn't, I'm asking your permission. It was that they had the belief that they could do that, and they had the capability to actually communicate that to someone, and they took the initiative to actually do it. And then they just let me know as a side note, hey, this is how I took care of the problem. That I felt like, yes, I might have done something right enough that that person felt they had all those skills to do what they needed to do.
So that is like the perfect example, Jason, in my opinion, of like demonstrating leadership, at least on a team or in an organization. Because sometimes I feel like what I see, and I've been there as a leader of a team and also in advising and working with others who have teams, that often it's like every time there's a problem, I come and I ask for permission to the boss, or what should I do? So like, how do you go from that stage? How do you go from the stage of, okay, let's say it's maybe our listener is just the dad and it's his kids coming to him every time there's a problem. Maybe it's the man who's owns a business and he's got 15 employees. If everyone's coming and saying, what do I do every time there's an issue, how do you shift your leadership? How do you make the change where you go from I'm involved in every little thing to I've empowered people and they've grown and they know the mission and they're clear? And I'm sure it's not like hey, one thing and it's fixes overnight. And like, how do you make that transition?
Yeah, I'd say there's several steps to that. Oftentimes, what I'll tell my kids is, and I say it tongue in cheek, 100% tongue in cheek, but I'll say to my kids, do I look like your mother? What do you think you should do? And my wife, she's okay with it because she knows I'm just messing around. And
That
also
may or may
trying
not be
teach
safe
them
to
a
say
lesson.
to every man out there listening. So get permission
That's right.
first,
You
right?
have to make sure your wife's okay with this. And so I'll say, do I look like your mother? What do you think you should do? And they'd be like, are you saying I can? And I'm like, no, I'm saying figure it out yourself. And
Yeah.
they're like, so I can? I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not my decision. Go figure it out, right? And so
Yeah.
that's what I do for my kids. In
Okay.
business, I can't quite say that same thing.
Do I look like your brother?
Maybe I will try that one of these days. That might be really funny.
Oh, that's awesome.
But in a little more serious note, I will oftentimes, if it's something where they're new to the whole business or new in their job or in that kind of a realm, the first foundational piece is they have to understand the culture of the company. Because a company, it's not me and it's not my employees. It literally is its standalone entity. And when a company's been structured right, it's going to almost have its own soul. It has its own personality. It has its way of communicating. It has the different tones that you're going to have within that company. And anytime someone is acting as a representative of the company, they should be acting with that kind of personality, that kind of communication style, those kind of core values. And if the employees don't align with that soul and personality of the business, it's going to be really difficult for them to feel like they can make those decisions because the soul of the company says we should do things this way and their personality says we should do things this way. You're going to have a terrible match. And so being able to offload and be a leader means either you have to train someone to move from thinking like this to like this, and or during the hiring process, you find people who are closely aligned to those core values. So it's not a big push to move them into alignment with that. And
Yeah.
so that's the foundation.
And if you are listening to this and not watching the visual version of this, Jason was moving his arm from parallel to perpendicular to demonstrate that, if they're not in alignment with the core values. So no, that's so good. And I love one thing you said a second ago is a company is a standalone entity. And I think why okay, if you're listening, why is that important? What's the distinction there? If the company is your identity versus a standalone identity or entity, that changes the way you run everything. And if if the company is you, you're never going to be able to step out of that role, and you're going to be limited, and you're going to have bottlenecks because you are the ultimate bottleneck of your business if the company is you. So I love that. I love that you made that distinction, and I just wanted to highlight that and point it out a little bit, Jason. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. And thank you for clarifying to make sure that the non-watching listeners have a clue what I'm talking about.
Yeah, go to YouTube if you need to see Jason's arms moving to explain some of that.
But the second step that I do is once I make sure that they understand the core values of the organization and the personality and the soul of the company, I work with them a little bit as they're getting comfortable, and I start putting things onto them. And if they ask me a question, well, what do you think? What would you do? And eventually I get to the point where they've had some experiences where it's kind of like baby steps, where the first time a kid's ever walking, you're not expecting them to run all the way across the room. You expect them to stand up, teeter, fall down, and then you work with them on it. Depending on how much experience your employee has, they may be in that same position where it's like they're exercising a muscle. And at first it's weak, but it gets stronger and stronger until I have some employees that come to me with a question, and my typical response, and it's gotten to the point where they just tell me this, my typical response is, I trust you more than me on that. What would you do? And they got to the point where the employee says, well, since you're going to trust me more than you trust yourself, this is what I'm going to do. I was like, bingo, we got it. This is a win.
Yeah, what a shift that is too, if you're hiring people because you believe they're the expert, not just because you need an order taker, right? Like what a difference that makes in an organization if you're promoting, hiring, developing people for that, because they would be better suited for that than you. It's funny, I was actually just talking with a woman yesterday that her biggest fear right now is, I know I need to grow, and I'm afraid I'm going to hand things over to someone, they're going to mess it up. So what would you say to that leader, to that business owner, or maybe even it's like, I can't let my kids do stuff. I can't let my kids mow the lawn because they're going to screw up the lawn. Like, how do you talked about some baby steps, but could you just a little bit more, like, how do I know I can trust this and hand this off to somebody?
Well, I'd say to that individual, I'd say, you're right, they're going to mess it up. Don't hand it off to them. And the reason I'd say
I'm so glad you said that.
the reason I'd say that is that leader is not in the right mindset to hand something off. And so right now, they're literally going to be hoping at a subconscious level to find the mistake because they are planning for there to be mistakes. And so they first need to shift the mindset and recognize, I can never hire someone that replicates the totality of me as an individual. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm hiring someone to perform a few core functions within an organization. And again, the organization's not me. Those core functions are not me. And the way they're going to do it doesn't have to represent how I would do it. As long as they're getting the desired outcome, I, as the leader, can come in and say, this is the standard process we follow. Within that standard process, you'll have questions. Feel free to come back to me for clarification. I'm going to provide you some training outside those standard processes, but then you're going to own this, and this is the result we're looking for. If it's not heading that way, if you're getting stuck, come to me and let's talk through it. But when you frame it that way, you're giving them ownership. And when someone feels like there's ownership, and you give them a little bit of grace to say, I know things are going to be rough at first, so feel free to come back to me before it's a big problem. You're opening them up to be successful, and you're looking for, how can I support them to be successful, rather than the mindset of, I'm expecting you to fail and I'm going to be watching over your shoulder until you fail. Then I'm going to come down like a thundercloud on you and rain on your parade.
Yeah, no, that's awesome and great advice. Okay, so steps again, just make sure, let's recap those. Step 1, vision or values, right? Clear on those. Step 2, how do we define letting people, is it let people fail? What is it?
No, I wouldn't say let them fail. You need to make sure you have it can be as simple as a simple checklist, but you have to have that process established of the way things should be done. And then aside from the process, people often get this confused and they put all of the training inside the process. The process is just a checklist to make sure that they're doing it right. The training lives aside from that. So you have to provide them with both of those pieces and provide them with an understanding of the desired outcome so that they can own that and recognize, at the end of the day, my job is to make sure I get this outcome. Here's the steps that they typically follow to get to that outcome. Here's the training on how they usually do those steps. But I also, as the person who's taking ownership of that outcome, I have the ability to go back to my superior, back to my boss, back to my leader, whoever it is, and ask them for assistance when I do get stuck.
Yeah. Jason, let's dive. I could like nerd out about systems and processes with you all day, but what's your story, Jason? Like, tell us about you. How have you gotten to where you're at? What's your life look like? Why can you even speak about leadership? Like, why I can tell, I mean, hopefully for our listener, they can tell, hey, Jason knows what he's talking about, but what's led you to this point?
So it's been, my entire life has led me here in reality. When I was a little kid, back at the ripe old age, I think I was 5. I was super little. I remember walking into this little department store, and this department store had a candy section. And we're not talking like a little one. It was an entire aisle dedicated to candy, probably like 50 linear feet with like 5 shelves, maybe 6 shelves, candy. And as a little kid, candy is the same as happiness, but
Yeah.
it comes at a cost. And I had to have money to buy candy. So I knew in that moment, as a teeny 5-year-old, I knew that money did buy happiness because it could buy candy. And I also knew I needed more money because I thought, as I was looking, like my eyes were, I'm sure, huge. I'm like, how much money would it take to buy all the candy? And that was my vision for life. Like, how do I get rich enough I can buy all, I want to just walk home and have all the candy from the store. And so that led me, it was that pivotal moment, which is crazy because like I'm 5 years old. I shouldn't care about money, but it led me on this journey of discovery. And I thought I had to become a basketball star. David Robinson, hands down, my favorite guy. Like I loved everything about him. I started studying him. I'm like, Dad, I got to be like basketball NBA and then I can be rich and I can have all the can. And he's like, no, sorry, son, you're never going to be tall enough and you can't jump. So it's not going to happen. Right? I'm like, oh, darn. So then he introduced me to this idea of business ownership. And we did a paper out as a kid and did different things and then started a lawn care business. And I hired my younger brother and we were known as the Lawn Boys. And I didn't even have a driver's license and we're covering 20 lawns in addition. Like I'm like 13, 14 years old, and we're pushing lawnmowers, riding our bikes, pulling lawnmowers, riding mowers, whatever it took to get the job done. And that was my first experience on both running a business, but also working with people. Because I had to work not only with my younger brother that I hired and keep him as a happy employee, but I also had to keep the customers happy. And that takes a ton of communication. And you cannot be successful standing in your own shoes. The only way that I found I can be successful is when I can put myself in someone else's shoes, the employee's shoes, the customer's shoes, and look at it from their perspective. And that new perspective gives me the ability to see differently. And so I've kept that as a part of business, done several different things. Some things were amazing, some were terrible. But I got to the point where I was running one company and I literally couldn't go on vacation. Now at this point, I'm married, I have kids, I've been running the business for years, I have a few employees, and I wanted to take 1 week off, no internet, no cell phone, no ability to get a hold of Jason. And I literally had customers look at me and say, what if something goes wrong? And that was like a punch gut moment where my gut's just hurting from the punch because I was like, wait, how did I mess up this bad that I can't even go on vacation? Literally, I built a business so I could take care of my family, and now my business owns me. And I realized in that moment, I had to figure it out and I had to shift. And so I had to become a totally different person so that my business would become a totally different business.
What was that process like?
For me, it took a ton of study and introspection. I went on, it was actually a family reunion, and we were in the middle of Lake Powell. And for anyone who doesn't know about Lake Powell, it has more coastline than the United States has ocean coastline. Like this thing, it's just this jagged, you're in these little canyons and it just all kinds of coastline everywhere, super tight little canyons, big open areas, massive amounts of water in this thing. And so there's no cell phone service. There was no internet at the time. And I'm at a family reunion and I'm looking around at these different people that are there. And I realized some of these people are running wildly successful businesses and they have money for all the toys. They can do all the things and they can take the time off. And I'm staring at him and I'm thinking, what did he do different? And I realized it was all in my head. It was the way I was thinking. And so I started studying other people. I started trying to find out, okay, who has been successful? What did they do? And I was fortunate enough, I've had a few different mentors, one of which I've actually partnered up on a new venture. And that's the Grisora I was talking about. And he and I we do our podcast where we're sharing these tips and tricks, but he kind of helped guide me. And he's like, here, you're stuck in a trap. Let me help you get out of that a little bit. But it was a long, slow process because another business coach of mine said, and it really hit me, he said, a business will rarely outgrow the owner. So being a business owner literally means you're on a self-development program. And if you're thinking this way, your business probably is going to run that same direction that you're looking. But if you shift your approach, you shift the direction you're looking, the business is going to run differently. And so for me, it was, I didn't even have a good company culture. I didn't have a company culture. I didn't even know that I should have regular meetings. I thought that was a waste of time. And then I realized, oh my goodness, what am I doing when there are no meetings, when there is no communication, when the team doesn't have a clue what's going on, when they don't know the personality, when they don't know how they should act? It's going to be chaos. And I have to be that guy that I said was a terrible leader. That was me. I was riding in on the horse trying to save the day. And I had to develop these skills so that I didn't have to be that person any longer. And it took me years.
Yeah. So it sounds like Everything you're talking about, leader, the good and the bad. You've been on both sides of that.
That's right.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, I want to change topics, but stay connected to what you're talking about. And not every one of our listeners is a business owner or entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
And so how could you apply these things into a family, into your life, or maybe into, like, if you're part of your church, how could you apply these same principles
Mm-hmm.
into just leading in your life?
So there's a scripture that in my faith, we have a scripture, and essentially it says, and I'm going to butcher it, but it says, all truth is independent in its sphere that it exists in. So the truth that that I'm using, I'm pulling these true principles out and I'm applying it in my business. But those same principles, they apply everywhere. Truth is, you can't go in and be like, oh, this truth is real here, but then it's fake over there. Nope, it doesn't work that way. If this thing is real, if it's an actual principle that's going to apply, I can apply it in my family. I can apply it in my relationships with my friends. I can apply it in business. I can apply it in my church organization. I can apply it in my personal development. The things that have the most value are going to apply universally. And so I think that first question people should be asking is, what is the problem I'm dealing with? And then how do I take what I'm hearing and apply it in that circumstance? As an example, the thing I'm studying the most right now, it's not actually business related at all. And it's not family related and it's not church related, but that it's actually how therapists work most effectively to help people overcome their problems.
Hmm.
And yet, let's see, if I was in sales, it's kind of a therapy role and I'm helping people. They have a problem. They're hoping to find a solution. They don't know how to get from problem to solution. That's my job as a salesman to figure out, okay, here's how I can apply what a therapist does in sales. If I go in and I'm a business person, even if I'm only an employee and not the owner at a company, what would happen if I took these therapy principles and applied it in my communication with coworkers, my boss, or customers? The whole idea is those same principles that just were working in sales also are going to work there. Could you imagine how much better you'd be as a husband if you understood the principles that therapists use when they're trying to communicate and help people recognize things? Like, these principles, they exist. They can be applied everywhere because they exist independently.
Yeah. Yeah. And what came to mind as I was hearing you say all of that, like going on vacation for a week, and can your business survive without you? You know, and for me, I've got young kids. You know, my oldest is 11. So if we go on vacation, my wife and I, and we leave the kids, because sometimes we like to do that, and it's important. If you're listening and you don't have vacations with your spouse without your kid, you do that. You'll be grateful. You know, but they're always with someone, so someone's always watching over them. But there's going to come a point in life where mom and dad aren't going to be there. You're going to have to go out and do things on your own. Are we creating an experience in our home for our children to feel like, hey, I have the confidence to figure things out. I have the confidence to go through things. Am I your mother? Right. Yeah. It's like you talked about running a business and not having core values and not having meetings. It's like, that's probably important. There's probably a truth and element to that in your family. Like, does your family have values that you talk about that they know and understand? Do you actually meet with your kids regularly and have a form of communication where problems can be handled and it's communicated, hey, this is how we structure things, how we deal with things? And so I love that you made that point. Like, truth is truth, and there's different, just because you have truth in one area of life, there's a lot of ways you can apply it into other areas. And so, yeah, no, I really like that. Yeah. What would you say, Jason, to our listener, who maybe our listener feels like, hey, I'm not a very good leader and I want to be, and I'm struggling to figure out where I should start or what I should do first. What would your recommendation be? Whether that's the business owner, whether that's the dad. Yeah, what would your advice be?
Well, for someone who is down on themselves a little bit, it's one, good to recognize where the weakness is, but it's not too good to spend a lot of time stewing in that pot. And so once you recognize there's a problem, rather than letting that replay in your head over and over and over and become the script that your subconscious and your conscious believes about yourself, it's important to start saying, okay, if that's my current perception of reality, why do I feel that way? What are the elements that make me think that? Are there specific events I can point back to that say that was the moment where I realized I'm not a good leader? It was this argument I had with my wife because she did something wrong. It was the way I took care of a problem. And you start identifying some of those specific, very real instances. And then you can ask yourself, if I was a good leader, how would I have handled that? And now you have the blueprint of who you want to become in those very specific situations. There's something interesting about the human body, and it's that we will take those specific experiences and we generalize those out to become the label we put on ourselves. So because we were poor at communicating with our spouse in one moment, we're like, oh, I'm a bad communicator. When, yeah, in that moment I was, but that wasn't a specific event. It isn't a label of my lifetime. And we have that freedom and ability to shift anytime we want. As soon as we recognize that was a label in that moment, not a label for a lifetime, we can start creating new labels through our actions.
No, that right there. If there's anything you learn out of this episode today, like that might be the most powerful lesson, Jason. Like how often and I'm asking this rhetorically, I know you know this, but how often does somebody have a moment of failure or weakness in their life, and then that becomes their label, their identity, the way they see themselves?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just so powerful. Like what if that happened and it just happened and it's not actually who you are? It was just that moment of weakness or that moment of struggle, right? And that's all it was, right? And so I love that you said that. I love that you shared that, because I think for a lot of people that are beating themselves up, it kind of starts with like having some awareness, recognizing it, and separating those things a little bit. Have you experienced that much yourself, or have you seen that with other people? Like, where did that understanding come from?
Well, I could tell you one experience I had. I'd been involved in a few different business ventures, and a couple of them crashed and burned gloriously. I mean, we're talking the investor is threatening to sue everybody in the company. Has said that he doesn't care if it kills the investor says he doesn't care if this whole problem kills the CEO. He hopes the CEO ends up in jail. And I'm like, as new to business kind of a guy at that point, relatively young adult, I was like, oh, whoa, this is like, I can't even process all that. But then that one, and I flipped into another experience that was another business. And I had a few of those, one after another. And I took at a subconscious level and started actually believing I was cursed and any business I got involved in was going to have problems. And it didn't, like, I can't even fathom that mindset now, but that's where I was at one point. Now, there was no basis in reality. Like, my presence had no effect on what the investor was doing, suing everybody else. Like, I was a teeny little cog, and yet I had that misconception, and it took me recognizing I'm giving myself way more importance than I actually have in this world. I've got center of the universe syndrome terribly, because I think my mere presence is going to make or break something. Like it took me a long time to recognize I am not that important, and my presence doesn't do jack squat. But it was a real label that I put on myself, and I had to figure out, how do I go through that process of peeling those undesirable labels back off again?
Yeah, no, that's so good. Such a good example. And yeah, if you're the dad that snapped at your kids, or the business owner that, hey, things look like this, things are bleak, right? Like that. that doesn't necessarily mean that's who you are the rest of your life. Really great advice. Well, one other thing you've talked about, and I've heard you speak about just in the conversation, a couple conversations we've had so far, Jason, you've talked about this idea of freedom. And I kind of want to just hear a little bit more about that before we wrap up today.
Mhm.
Like what is freedom to you, and how does somebody find that?
So I would say my definition of freedom doesn't apply to anyone else. We probably all
Mm,
have some
cool.
common threads that apply, but I was talking to someone the other day, and their definition of freedom was having enough money and enough time that he can go fishing on a regular basis. If he achieves that, that's his freedom. That's all he cared about. Other people that I know, their definition of success is wildly different, and they don't care about having free time. They want to make this massive impact and they want to change the world. And so everyone individually should figure out, what is it I'm chasing? And what the other thing is people, myself included, need to recognize that changes throughout our life. We're not going to chase the same thing forever. It's like seasons of life. And during this season of life, I'm planting this field and I have to tend and cultivate that field. And the harvest that I'm going to get is the benefit from it. So for me, freedom means I'm going to have enough time to have excellence in my family, to take care of my family, to have fun, but also to make an impact on the world. I am planning to help 1 million small business owners have a shift from being stuck, trapped in a cage like I was, where they don't know if they can leave the business for a week, to having the time and money freedom so that they can actually live the life that they're envisioning that they're supposed to live. So for me, that's a major component of what success is going to be. But that is, I need to have the freedom to be able to chase that.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I like that you started with freedom is different to different people, because I think sometimes we hear someone's version of freedom and then think, okay, if I want freedom, I've got to be like this person. And you might try, and that might be a good thing. And you might do that and realize, hey, that's not what I actually want. Yeah. I want one question I want to ask about this topic. And I'll give a little context, because I've thought a lot about freedom and what is that? And what does that mean? And in fact, I had somebody say to me a couple years ago, okay, if you say you want freedom, can you say what that means without talking about time or money? Because I feel like that's like the one thing that you hear often, especially entrepreneurs. Well, I want to make enough money, I don't have to worry, and the business, I have enough cash flow that I can do what I want whenever I want. But why? Why would you want that? What would that do for you? What would that create for you? And I feel like I used to say that. I used to say I wanted those two things. And look, I still do. Like, I want to have an abundance of time. I want to have abundance of money or income, but it's more because of what it can create and do for me. And one shift I've had in my thinking is, to me, freedom has become that I'm at peace and happy with my circumstances.
Right.
Like currently, right now. And to me, like, I feel like that's really become freedom for me, is, hey, do I feel, if I am stressed and worried about the future and what's going on and what's happening, I'm actually not very free. If I can be, hey, I'm present and I'm satisfied and I'm happy, doesn't mean there's not like the goals I have or games to play or dreams to chase. And I've come to just find, I believe that, like, true freedom is like, it doesn't matter how much money's in the bank account or not, I'm going to be happy. It doesn't matter how much time I have or not. Like, I'm actually happy. But curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I was just, as you were talking, trying to remember who it was that said it. They said that work was God created work for humans. And
Hmm.
what he means by that is, we are happiest when we're busily engaged, actively working, doing something that's meaningful. And
Mhm.
he described that the work that we do is not necessarily tied to the income we make. So income should come from providing services to people in some way. That can
Right.
happen in a number of ways that doesn't have to be connected to the work you do, but we as individuals feel the most satisfaction, the most fulfillment, the most happiness when we are anxiously engaged doing something. And some people think that it comes from being pulled behind a boat on skis, but they're still actively doing something. And the most difficult work that a person can ever do is nothing, because you can never take a break from it, right? If you sit on a couch all day, you're exhausted because you're doing nothing and you can't get away from it. But when you have something that you're chasing, some impact that you're making, I think that you're going to find the happiness that you're looking for in life. Oftentimes, we're unhappy when we feel the work that we're doing doesn't align with what the impact we think we should be having on our sphere of influence. So if we can bring the work and the impact into alignment, we'll find the happiness that we're seeking.
Yeah, that's so good. No, I love that. And you talk about like the boat or the fishing or those things. And I think why that feels like freedom for people is, let's use the boat's a better example of this, because if you're being pulled behind the boat, your focus is all on what you're doing in that moment. And you can't be worried about the business and the, and the things in life. It's like, if I start thinking about all of that, I'm going to fall and smack the water. Right. And so I think sometimes it's like, hey, can I? And so we try to escape life by doing those things, by whether it's a high thrill or being out on Lake Powell where no one can actually reach you, right? When it's like, hey, can I be doing things and be involved in something that helps me feel greater? I love one thing you said too. I just want to highlight also, Jason. I love that you shared 1 million small business owners you want to help, because the first thought is that's big and that's crazy and that's scary. And you said that the other day when we were talking, and I went to my business partner about this group Rise Up Men we've talked about. And I said, we had a goal like, hey, we want to have 100 men. I'm like, that's not a big enough goal. I was just talking to Jason. He's going to help 1 million small business owners. We got to help 10,000 men change their lives the next 3 years. And so I love that. I'm glad you're sharing that, and like without reservation, without a scarcity, and maybe there is fear behind it. I don't know. And like, I'm glad you're just like stating that to the world, because it's powerful. So, as we come to wrap up, first off, Jason, where can your podcast, your books, where can our listener connect with you? What's the best way? I want more Jason in my life. How do I find it?
Well, if you can't get enough Jason, you're always welcome to come follow me on social media. I'm the Jason McKenzie with the red beard. If you haven't seen me because you're listening, I've got a very pronounced red beard and brown hair. You can't miss me. Only one of me in the world. Also, we run the Small Business Big Visibility podcast. We run the Grisora Life podcast as well. So you're welcome to come follow those. You can check me out at smallbusinessbigvisibility.com, grisora.com, or jason-mckenzie.com.
Awesome. We'll make sure we have those description, or in the show notes. We'll have those links so you can reach out to Jason or see more of what he's working on, what he's doing. And last question, would love to ask you before we wrap up, Jason. How do you want to be remembered by others?
I hope that people remember that Jason was always there to try and lift and make everything around him better.
Simple and profound. That's awesome. Well, great, Jason. Appreciate your time. Appreciate the lessons around leadership that you've shared. If you're a listener, and I mean, a lot of great things that can apply to your family or your personal life. And if you're in business, I mean, check out what Jason's doing. He's all about helping people create freedom in the business where the business doesn't rely on you. And so many good nuggets. Go back, listen to this, repeat it. There's probably a few things you can pick up if you're starting a business, if you're in the middle of business, if you feel like business is got its arms around your neck and won't let you go. Follow more of what Jason's doing. And once again, Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And to our listener, today's the day.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.